So Bernard, something that's kind of newer in the SEO content world-ish is the idea of experience. What am I missing? Expertise, authority, trust. These things are important to content quality, it turns out. And I think it caused a little bit of confusion. Some people are just kind of mad that their acronym is now complicated and you have to explain it to people. But what does this experience kind of framework mean, and what are the implications for people's content strategy?
Yeah, great question, Ross, and very timely as well, right? The introduction of this extra letter, EAT, happened, late last year in 2022. I think for those of you that are listening that, are not aware of EAT or now EEAT, I think it's important to backtrack to where this idea even stemmed from to begin with. I believe at some point the manual reviewers handbook that Google gives to people who literally sit down and manually inspect websites was either leaked or somehow got out, right? And so in this handbook, this is where concepts like your money, your life, or YMYL, and expertise, authority, and trustworthiness originally stemmed from. What's happening is that Google employs a lot of manual reviewers. And literally, it's these manual reviewers' jobs to go through and look at websites manually to look and see whether or not the content, the layouts, the way that the website is designed and presented exemplifies expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And you can imagine it's essentially like this Tinder-like approach where somebody sits in front of a screen, a website pops up, and they go, yeah, this looks good, right? Thumbs up. Or like
swipe right,
swipe left, and like, no, this is bad, right?
Okay.
So essentially, that's what these manual reviewers are doing. And they're doing that to train Google's algorithm to say a website looks good and a website looks bad. So we need to start there to really think about what's going on with this introduction of this newer letter, which is known as experience, right? Essentially, we're moving into a world where searchers are not necessarily as trustworthy of what Google search has to offer. And, I've heard this talking amongst other SEO practitioners, but a lot of SEO practitioners will say, yeah, I don't necessarily trust the Google search results for what I'm looking for anymore.
Because, I go to Reddit or something.
Yes, exactly. I go to Reddit. I go to Quora. I just ask my friend who knows a lot about subject X or whatnot. And you could imagine in Google's point of view, that's a big problem, right? Google wants people to trust the search results. And the experience point of view is the newest addition to what they're essentially tasking manual reviewers to really think through and say, does this content exemplify somebody who looks like they really know and understand the subject?
Makes sense. Yeah, one of the first things that came top of mind, a recent LinkedIn post by Gaetano Donardi, who is on this program, smart SEO consultant. He had a post on, I forget what he was buying, but his pathway to buying whatever that thing was not to go to Google. It was actually go to YouTube, because by nature, at least for the queries that are actually quality, there's definitely spammy versions even of videos. To actually shoot a video and review a product, you have experience with that product, right? So that was something he felt was justified in the context of that query type, because he didn't trust what Google was going to show him for those things. I think that makes a lot of sense and you see it more and more on a lot of those query types, and it maybe is further indication of that need for experience when videos are present, is users are prompting Google that they want that experience. I often say what kind of order you see the tabs set at the top of the search is an indication of kind of what will often get fed into the search result itself, but might also be an indication of some of those experience things too.
Totally. So I think Gaetano and you just nailed it on its head to really exemplify the industry that Google is essentially trying to tackle first, which is affiliate, right? I'm sure we have all done a Google search for best whatever and got to clearly an SEO affiliate site where there's a stock image. It says pros, cons. It literally doesn't say anything about anything. And check price on Amazon. It doesn't even tell you the prices of these things, right?
Yeah.
You just click on it. You get the referral tag. It's an affiliate site. And you walk away feeling very dissatisfied, right? And so essentially you can imagine what these manual reviewers are doing in the background is that they're going to exactly those types of sites and they're swiping left and they're like, no, that sucks, right? That does not look good. And so you can imagine, right, like as content SEO practitioners, we like to game the system. And gaming the system essentially then is oftentimes literally just copying what the top performers of each category are doing, right? So, if you're an affiliate, you're probably looking up to NerdWallet, to the Wirecutter, right? To CNET, whatever, right? And if you're in health and wellness, you're looking up to Healthline, WebMD, right? You have your little like top movers and shakers. And when you go to those websites, right, chances are you'll have these like why you should trust us, how the evaluation criteria that we took to understand why this product is better or worse than, other products. And so you could imagine manual reviewers are looking at those and likely saying, yes, this is great. And so then you see experiences that include video and trust criteria and this newer idea that, Lily Ray just talked about, which is authorship boxes, right? Like being this thing that publishers, affiliate sites are really trying to call out, right? They're like, hey, Ross wrote this article. And by the way, Ross is a CEO at Siege. He's been practicing, SEO and content for decades. He really knows his stuff. And so that's why you can trust Ross. And so people look at that and essentially, in a lot of ways, they just end up copying what the top things work. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like understanding why all of that is happening, I think is interesting and also important so that you can now come up with your own ideas to say, okay, well, if I am essentially being graded by a human right on the back end who's really trying to analyze whether or not my content has real subject matter experience, what would I give them to demonstrate that? And I think if you're thinking about it in that manner, well, not only now are you potentially thinking about new things, you're actually doing things that Wirecutter, Healthline, right, these top people in the specific segments and industries may not necessarily be doing. And that actually can get you above them. Or else if you're just copying what they're doing, how are you ever going to compete head to head?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting theme of some of our conversations is just adding things, essentially. Like, I know as SEO practitioners, there's a natural lean to, like, in some ways, you have to at least pay attention to what's there on the search result. And I see that a lot. I have respectful conversations with clients of like, we should take a beat on what the search result is saying to us and like try to do something different on some of these things for sure. And I think by nature, you see that like one of the most common playbooks I see, not misapplied necessarily, but maybe just not getting to that experience piece as much, is they'll have the reviewed by author. And and I think it sort of goes to that is a step you can put on that on an article, right? But the sunk cost of doing that, the difficulty of doing that for anybody is very, very low, relatively. I mean, I've even seen people have, of course, you could have like a credible author, hopefully what Lily was saying. Something I see as a common mistake is a lot of people will have that, but then the organizational kind of experience factor is off. Like you'll go to their about page or you go to the wider site and it's just like stock photo usage throughout. You can't even find footprints to a real organization in some way. And sometimes these are actually real organizations under an affiliate site or like it's a holding company under a site. So I'm like, this is a real company that somehow just in the nature of what they're doing is not showing that they have credible experience in the lens of doing all the playbook SEO things just to very often to eke out margins. But that I think costs a lot of these companies in a lot of ways.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more in the sense that as SEOs, we do like to game the system. And a lot of it does go awry in the sense that you take this principle and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to write about, the best hiking boots under whatever, $100. And it's going to be like reviewed by this hiker or whatever, right? And you have to really put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's searching for, like hiking gear to begin with. And they don't give as much crap about, right? Like this hiking like gear being reviewed by, this hiker. They care a lot more about, say, like how this product was tested. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people will go out of their ways to think that, this application of authorship boxes has to be taken to its extreme. Whereas really what you should be thinking about is, okay, what's the end user here to really do? And, how can I offer that experience? I think to your point, video is an amazing way to stand out to everybody. Because you can imagine these behemoths like the NerdWallets, the Wirecuters of the world. Sure, they have video on some, but it's very expensive for, say, the Wirecutter to produce video on all electronics that are expensive, right? So that's where you can really carve a niche out for yourself if we're talking about, electronics and videos. Is that you just focus on, say, photography equipment and produce videos and, buy all the photography equipment and, photograph with them and whatever, right? And like that's really how you could take that to the next level.
For sure. And it's not expensive. I mean, it costs a good amount of money, but it's a sunk one-time cost that I find myself recommending to clients a lot is across your core sales pages. This is a good argument to have original photography there. Like have a photographer who's quality one time come in your office or your retreat where your team is there, get some people and some swag, or obviously put it in the context of whatever you're doing. If you're a review site, have your company swag shirt, you're testing a products in context. Doing that one time and putting it across about page, the home page. Of course, actual reviews is going to matter, but that's something that seemingly is missed by a lot of people in the context of their site design, but goes a long way towards that experience building for sure. And I think you touched on it well there, where sometimes people take it too far as well. Like you need a hiking expert. Sometimes can't hurt, I guess, but is it really a YMYL type query that people are differentiating on that and things like that?
Totally. Yeah. And so you can imagine, right, Google, this update came out at the end of 2022, right? This added the experience. Well, guess what was also really hot around the end of 2022? AI content, right? So you can imagine.
Take a drink.
Right. What's happening is that, AI content means that the cost of mediocre commodity content is now pennies on the dollar. And we are seeing the era of infinite content essentially come to be in the landfill of content known as the internet. And essentially, what Google wants to at least steer content creators away from is this idea that you cannot get away with just pumping out commodity content. You need to actually bring something of substance to the table. The introduction of authorship boxes is essentially another step towards saying, look, if it's AI content generated, it's not that it's a bad thing per se, but users care, and we're making our stance clear that it's important that things be experience led and that sort of thing. Although Google has also come out to say it can rank as long as it's helpful, right? Like we don't care if it's AI content generated, but I think that this is a lot of Google PR almost saying like, hey, these are the steps that we're taking to ensure that the quality of your content that you're getting from Google search stays high bar, high quality, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, a common it's a theme again because I'm bringing it up again, but put it in a new spin. I'm realizing like if you think about your wider website of really every element, if you think about it, can be commoditized in what's being presented, whether it's stock photo, it's copy, it's your author, or it can be a differentiated experience that couldn't be used very easily or immediately by someone else. So I think about that. Obviously, generated content is one. Talked about stock photos already. Site design is another. We were really pushing Kevin and Eli on this podcast, but he had a recent newsletter. His newsletter is good about, in some way, and I'm biased, but the importance of overall site design in the context of these things, and that goes a long way towards building trust as well, authoritativeness for sure. But that I think a lot of people are going with the out of the box kind of site design and content and stock photos, and really every element on your site you could almost put a finger on and be like, is this the exact same thing that anyone could do in that context? And maybe that's an actionable way for people to think about it, is when you get to that point where you can say that about everything. And this doesn't mean be very expensive. Like one thing we say to clients recently is, maybe you're a site aesthetic or you're in real estate, it makes sense to show real photos. But I like what Policy Genius does, where if you go to their blog, and hopefully we can show it on the video, like they apply a saturation effect that pops their brand color. So it's orange, it's green. It's the same stock photos everyone has access to, but it's just a little bit of work, which I'm guessing AI could probably be able to help accentuate quickly. That's a differentiated experience, and maybe is getting towards some of those things that users actually would want in that manual review.
Yeah, which I guess is a good segue into the problem with a lot of this. And the problem with a lot of this, as you were just mentioning, is we're moving into a world where it's more about the intangibles, right? It's more about the softer experience of content. If we're talking about imagery, we're talking about page layout, page experience, readability, legibility, right?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to go to a content practitioner and say, hey, this page layout is no good, right? It's very subjective. And I think that that's the problem that a lot of practitioners are running into, is that, when we lived in a world where title tags, needed to be X amount of characters and meta descriptions needed to be Y amount of characters, and, you had to lead with an H1, right? Is a very formulaic approach to SEO. And essentially, with this evolution of manual reviewers plus algorithmic penalization or rewarding, right? We're moving into this softer world where it's that subjectively just doesn't look good. And nobody wants to be told subjectively like that it doesn't look good and that's why you're not performing. And so that gets us to the nuances of, well, what are we supposed to do about, all of these changes that are being made? I think video is probably one of the more objective ones, which is why you hear a lot of talk for SEOs, content practitioners to push video, because it's binary, right? It's like, well, your content doesn't have a video, so you produce a video. But, outside of that, right, it's like what other I guess, tangible recommendations are you thinking about in terms of, pushing something that's more objective for content marketers to really say, oh, okay, yes, I need to
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great conversation. Literally multiple emails in the last week on this exact subject. A few different ways it's being approached. Not all of it's feasible for every company size. One, we're A/B testing two versions of a site. Mm-hmm. So one has like lower font size, and there's it's interesting. We're going to test essentially the no-brainer is that higher font size is more helpful, but there's a possibility that in some ways you might actually find less reading might actually drive conversion up. So that's one of those balances that we're working on. But those are kind of, you could definitely measure time on site, engagement, those kinds of changes. Of course, it tends to be a pretty wholesale change to get there. We're building and sharing more case studies on that context. I think putting it in context to competitors, unfortunately, we're going to this back cyclical thing. It's like their site looks better, it's performing better. Those are some actionable things. I like a darker thought I had while you were talking is I think in the SEO industry, and maybe we're even like a few years past this where it's not that pertinent of a conversation, but the skill set of a good SEO these days, I feel like has transitioned from a more technical SEO to a creative-minded SEO, where that older school transactional, optimize the numbers person is just maybe not as successful today. And I see that pretty consistently when clients come to us and they seemingly have that person in-house. And then you see it conversely against the brand teams that are sloppy with SEO best practices, but somehow their traffic relatively is pretty up and to the right, or at least has the basis of, unlike this technical site, you move a few widgets around and suddenly that can skyrocket. While the technical aging out of that skill set is unfortunate, but it's just kind of the new world of what a successful SEO needs to be, it seems like.
Totally. I could not agree with you more. I've had this thought for the longest time, which is that unless you're doing SEO for a very large website, which you can imagine is like a TripAdvisor, a Zillow, Yelp, Expedia, right? Millions of pages, doorway pages to act as lead like SEO, like sources. Your technical SEO, for the most part, is taken care of by modern content management systems, right? Modern content management systems have a lot of rules and fundamentals in place where internal linking just happens, right? Title tags automatically get, concatenated at the right characters, all that good stuff. So, right, you can imagine, obviously, if you work for a TripAdvisor and you're able to decrease your page load speed by 100 milliseconds across hundreds of millions of pages, it's going to have a sizable impact. Or, right, if you fix some sort of architecture problem or, modify your internal linking, templating, whatever, massive impact, because 1% improvement across 100 million pages is a large impact on search. But for the 99% of other sites that are mostly content driven, and the reason why somebody's coming to consume your content through search is as a result of the text or the stuff that you're putting on the page. A lot of the technical SEO stuff's not gonna matter, right? And so I see this role of SEO, like you just mentioned, really transitioning from this, to the T instruction, check all the boxes, audit the thing, to this softer thing of creative, content strategy, right? Editorial, brand. And it matters, right? It's like, some of the things that you called out, like the brand voice, the page layouts, those sorts of things are way softer, but also at the same time, right? There's like this idea of the table of contents that you see right in the above the fold experience for websites like Healthline, Investopedia, right? Those as those little blocks like in the above the fold where it'll diagram out the different sections that belong to the content that is on the page. And somebody can click on it, basically just jumps them to exactly that section on the page. And therefore, the user can self-select which specific answer that they're caring about. So you can imagine, right, a lot of people probably looked at what Investopedia and Healthline were doing, saw this above the fold table of contents and said, wow, okay, well, if they're doing it, we're going to do it too. And that's great. That's fine. But you have to imagine, why that's happening, like why that's actually useful is because when a user lands on it, well, it's very helpful for them to say, the reason why I'm here to learn about 401ks is not because I want to know what it is, but because I want to know why a 401k is different than an IRA. And when they see that link in the table of contents, like, great, that's exactly why I'm here. They can click on it, go to the section, find their answer. So all of that's to say that it's really about relevancy in intent, which is just a nod towards content strategy, right? In your above the fold experience, are you actually providing the user with the tools necessary or the information necessary for them to find what they needed to begin with, right? And like that's content strategy. That's like really thinking deeply about the topic and making sure that the answers are likely to be found on the page rather than just serving this stock image, hero image that takes up 80% of the landing page, which like, that's like legacy 5-year, 10-year ago, like, good practice of SEO. Maybe because manual evaluators were like, yeah, websites that look like that seem better. And then, you kind of didn't keep up with the times or whatnot.
Yeah. No, I love that thinking of just essentially thinking about the craft of every pixel above the fold. In some ways, I think of calculators when you say that. That's a common use case where you could bury a calculator deep in a blog post with beyond under a hero. But there's really, that hero serves no purpose in that context. You should drop right into the calculator experience, have low time to value, while then in the true EEAT experience we talked about before, that above the fold hopefully communicates this is a trustworthy organization. Could give a quick answer version of what is an IRA. You could give the medical bio on hover that you don't have to click out to see that person's information. Yeah, love that. It's almost like, what is the why behind this reason? And I think that's a great way of thinking, actually win
right.
in search long term.
Totally. Yeah. So I think that's sort of again, I get it, right? I came from a traditional SEO background where I read Moz guides and, made sure my T's were crossed and my I's were dotted and whatever. And then you realize that, search has evolved quite a bit. And I think that, my advice to everyone out there is never stop testing, right? Yeah. You don't know what is specifically working for, say, your industry or other people's industries. And, if you looked at Healthline pages, they don't have hero images anymore, right? And the reasoning is because likely hero images don't matter, right? Because a lot of the hero images that they had were just like pictures of, bowls of fruit or vegetables or whatever, right? Yeah. And they're just like, okay, well, somebody landing on this is not finding what they needed. And they likely tested, the presence of that versus not. And, they arrived at the not being better, like the not presence.
Yeah, they always look, our kind of current take from most blog experiences is, it's always gonna load faster without a hero image above the fold. It's definitely always have as small as possible image up there, ideally a pop of color. But what they pull off, which sometimes a hero helps accomplish, is establish credibility. But sometimes it can be counter to that. It can remove credibility. So Healthline has an overall premium UX. They've built a brand. And because it feels engaging without the hero, that is a good move. I completely agree with that take. Not always is that possible, and the hero can help, or not possible, but feasible without it. I'm sure Healthline spent several $100,000 thinking about that layout. It is Red Ventures, though. Maybe it's a couple $100. I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's not to say that heroes are bad, right? Like you're saying, right? It's like if back to, I like to use hiking gear. I don't know why as an example, but essentially you can imagine if I were running a hiking gear affiliate site and I had a hero, whereas literally all the pairs of hiking boots and like, me just thumbs upping like in the side or something, that would definitely demonstrate experience, right? And trustworthiness. And the presence of that is likely to be beneficial than not, but it's a very specific application, right? So back to your point, it's really understanding the why, right? Like why is somebody here to consume the content? And in that vein, how do we present the content and infuse it with experience, authority, trustworthiness in the most relevant manner, and not just do things because we think that the system is valuing that, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the system is being trained by humans, and humans are, obviously it's still pretty good at reasoning in terms of what's valuable and what's not.
Yeah. Another use case of the hero, I love that one. We actually had a product review site where we did that exact thing. It's not rocket science. Like, take a photo that shows you had experience testing it. Another one is Very Well Health. They do on nutrition info SERPs. Their hero will actually like almost be the barcode on a back of a banana.
Oh, okay.
And that hero image actually is the quick answer. And it does get pulled into search results and image pack where applicable. So there's always that tension that I hear people bring up to us, like, won't they not read the article? And like, wouldn't you rather land on the site than not land on it at all, kind of thing? Right. So I think that's one of the smarter applications I've seen is like actually, you literally could define things in a photo. I think using text is probably good for search for definitions, but nutrition info just made sense to have it above the fold.
Like a nutrition facts, yeah. I guess to build on top of that, when you search for any residential address, you'll get the Redfins, the Zillows, right, the Realtors.coms showing up. And when you click into or tap into one of those search results on mobile, then you literally get bed, bath, price, square footage, lot size, year built immediately. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine, right, like the application of that happening is literally likely to be somebody who's just driving around, sees a for sale sign, right, on some house and goes, oh, that's interesting, Googles exactly that. And what is that user in the mindset of wanting to know? It's listing price, bed, bath, square footage, year built, right? And so they're giving the user exactly what they want as quickly as possible. Yeah. And that's I think, where we need to be thinking, not, like, how do we game the system, right?
Yeah. I mean, the graph of gaming the system being successful, I think, continues to decline. Yeah. I think we maybe had a little speed bump where AI came out, right? Where you could like republish a shit ton of content very quickly. But I think that speed bump's gonna, if not already been closed. Yeah. So this has been a good conversation, Bernard, as always. Thanks for coming on. And best of luck, everybody, building some experience out there.
Totally. Best of luck.